working on some really cool initiatives right now in the startup space with AI, and that's one of the main focal points of the conversation today. What are you seeing right now with the impact of AI in businesses?
AI is truly the next internet, the next big .com. We're going to be able to use it in ways that we can't even imagine now.
There's also the darker side of AI.
It was created by humans, right? And we are imperfect ourselves, so it's going to reflect those imperfections in very different ways across the board.
Ginger Luckey, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me on, Mike.
I know I haven't seen you in a while. Well, no, I just saw you in November. You were out here in Phoenix.
I know, but with the new year, everything goes by so quick.
I know.
2024 has seemed like a whole new decade, really.
I feel like whenever I've ran into you or seen you or I've just jumped on the phone with you, I feel like it's been like a massive gap. I feel like, God, I haven't talked to you in a while, but literally it's only been like a couple weeks.
I think that's because we both have so many fun things going and changing and shifting. So excited to be able to spend this time and kind of dive in.
Yeah, and you're traveling a lot and you're working on some really cool initiatives right now in the startup space with AI. And that's one of the main focal points of the conversation today with you is that you're passionate about AI. You also love startups. And you also have an amazing sense of what's happening right now in the world, just from not like the geographical space, but also just what's being innovated on the ground level. So I'd love to just open up the conversation for you to just share. What are you seeing right now with the impact of AI in businesses?
Yeah, great question. And that could really be answered hundreds of ways, but I'll kind of back up and give you a little background on the view that I'm going to give, kind of set the stage. I got straight out of my UCSB education, went into economics, and I kind of lived in the startup world for about 5 years. And then I came over to corporate Big Four. So you really get a good scene and a good view of what's happening, super quick and being spun up in the startup type of space, as well as like what the Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies are thinking about and how they're looking at AI. So I think AI is truly, the next internet, the next big .com. We're going to be able to use it in ways that we can't even imagine now. And so if you've done any of if you know about the hype cycle, kind of on how sort of innovation technologies work, for those listening, it's, you really start with it can do everything and anything, and you're in this kind of paradise honeymoon, and then you kind of come back down to reality and think, all right, well, maybe we got to put some guardrails and boundaries around this. But I think it's really going to change everything from the way that we, educate our kids, from the way that we, do business, from the way that we just are able to utilize kind of our human passions instead of just doing kind of the automated tasks that could be done by AI. So I think there's a lot of sectors we could go into. But
do you think it's going to compromise people's ability to establish authentic connections with other human beings?
So I would actually make the argument that I think it's going to be able to separate the part of life and human work that could be done by a machine to actually free up more time and just, thoughts and strategy and, passion projects for the humans to be able to connect with. So I would say that, I'm seeing with a lot of different types of clients, we're now just separating, here's what AI can do and here's what it can't do. And just like when, iPads and tech came out and people thought, oh, restaurants are all going to have these iPads
Yeah,
where we order.
Remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, we all really value and, God made us to be creatures that connect with other humans. And so I think we're going to be able to do even more of that when we're able to separate and say, okay, these hours I spend making lists or planning or calendaring or kind of the manual things, those can be done by AI, by getting to know me and what I like to do and helping me prioritize. And then I have more focused time where I can really be present with other folks.
I love that too, because I think for a lot of people, especially in the US, where we're in this kind of hustle, busy culture, there's always a magnitude of, I got to get my to-do list done. And I have so many things that I have to work on right now that where's all this time that I need right now to accomplish all that, especially if you're a mom, raising kids, or you're even in a marriage where you have a bunch of kids and a family. Where is time? Where are you going to get that? And I love what you said about it's going to actually free people up more to do more of the things that they want. And I would assume that with people listening right now, there's also the darker side of AI. It's watching content, the distortion of a message. You've seen it probably in your experience on the startup level, and then, working in the Big Four arena, that, there's all this kind of distortion around messaging and truth. What is real? What's being told to me? Is this AI telling me something, or is this an actual person behind a news desk feeding me a news line, feeding me something that's happening in the stock market? I mean, we could just go on and on about, what happens when AI, someone generates AI messaging in the stock market and says the stock markets, there's really bad news coming out of the Middle East or coming out of China, or Europe's crashing down. Or how would you maybe curb someone's worry around that?
Yeah, no, a great question. And really, usually the first question that folks ask when they start kind of understanding what AI can do, it's important to keep in mind a couple things. First, it was created, by humans, right? And we are imperfect ourselves. So it's going to reflect those imperfections in very different ways across the board. Second, with any sort of technology that's new or just growing and powerful, right? A lot of humans are attracted to power, and you get bad actors, whether it's in cybersecurity, whether it's in, just across the board. So
Yeah.
I think with any tech, let's not blame AI for kind of the bad actors. I think it's good that people are really thinking about the impact it's going to have on us, and kind of thinking ahead of time, the detriments of that alongside the positives. So I think at the end of the day, it's going to be the type of humans that are using and leveraging AI that will, either create these massive success stories. I don't know how much you've followed some of the medical improvements and breakthrough that
Just a
we've had
little
with
bit.
AI.
Yeah, just a little bit, but I'd love to hear more.
I've seen some unbelievable examples. So my mother-in-law is in a wheelchair because of a spinal cord injury that she had that could not be solved by manipulating certain parts in the brain to help her walk. But there are cases of folks that have been paralyzed, and when they're able to use AI to train the brain in a way that it's using parts it hasn't used before, you're seeing people that have been wheelchair bound for years able to walk. And that's because of technology. I mean, the way that it's able to actually, I just read a study where they were gauging a kind of doctor's ability to give a diagnosis. And two things were interesting. The first is the AI got the diagnosis better than the doctor. But second, even the empathy level of the doctor versus the AI robot, right? Like you're able to kind of build in human qualities. And there was actually a higher spike in the reaction to the folks that were receiving bad news when it was being told in the way, that the AI decided to phrase it. So super interesting things like that, right? Those are things that I get excited about, where you're able to pair a technology and an innovative type of thing like AI with this totally different human experience. Because I think a lot of people decouple those, and I think they're really tied together.
Yeah, and that was actually a great segue, because that was a question I was going to ask you, which was, what are you excited about with AI? And outside of the medical industry, just in your work and experience and your passion for the space, what other things, or maybe is there a company, an industry, or a sector that you are also really excited about outside of medical?
Yeah, I think the one that is probably that gets me most excited is education, and I'll tell you why. The way that kids are learning now in the school system, I really think it's built more for the teachers and maybe parents or the adults in the system rather than the kids. And we all learn differently, right? I'm a very visual learner. I'm a very hands-on. Some people just want to be, dig their nose in a book. My brother was reading, tens of books every day, where I want to kind of like projects to tinker on. And so imagine if you're able to, well, I guess before I go into that, let's also think about what we have as a generational shift. The millennials have a very workforce culture that's different than the Gen Xers and the boomers, which is very different than Gen Z and Gen Alpha that's coming out. So I think we've all kind of heard that, what's happening with Gen Z, and they're wanting to work or wanting to not work. And I really think it's more of they don't have the ability to connect their passions or what they might be good at or be able to contribute to work. And I think that's because of the education system, right? Be able to to put people through a system that is typically, not so tailored to how each person learns, what they might be good at, what they might be passionate at. I think being able to unlock that earlier with AI type of tools that can learn from, the kid or student that's there, you're able to really unlock potential that's tapped years down the road. Because from my experience, one reason I love being in startups is it gave me a massive breadth of experience with a whole bunch of different roles and wearing different hats, in a short period of time. And I would not be where I am in corporate if I wasn't able to kind of say, oh, I don't want to be the back end numbers person, but I don't want to be kind of front end sales. I really like this inner, kind of middle ground of part people, part data. Like that's my sweet spot. Figure that out for 10 years, 20 years, who knows? So if you're able to back up and say, okay, how are we able to not only like inspire and motivate and educate kids in a way that's like impactful? It's not just a, test number, remembering numbers and scores, but really able to, narrow in on how and why, those people might be able to unlock. And then, because they're our future, right? I mean, the folks that are going through those now, whether they go through a traditional university or they're, a homeschool path where they're using some, AI education bot of the future, I think it's really exciting to see kind of that potential untapped.
And this is quite fascinating also when it comes to purpose, passion and meaning and deciphering between purpose and meaning. I had a conversation in the podcast, I believe it was a couple episodes ago, where we were talking about the difference between purpose and meaning. And my guest, Jamie Gruber, said, through his conversations with Dr. Benjamin Hardy, that there is no difference between purpose and meaning. And I find it really fascinating because as you're talking about AI, one of the questions that popped up for me was the utility or the use case for Generation Alpha or the Gen Zs that are going through and trying to find out the, air quotes, what do you want to do with your life? I find it fascinating that maybe AI or a chat GPT can help somebody really truly figure out what it is that they want to do. Well, like myself, being an edge millennial, right, which I learned that term a couple of years ago, I was like wandering in this, metaphorical vast desert, like trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And it took me quite a while to do that. I would imagine, just based upon your experience and what you're seeing in the marketplace and also in the landscape, that a tool like ChatGPT, the first iteration of its kind, could help a young kid, an 18-year-old, a 17-year-old, a 20-year-old, even a 40-year-old, figure out how to become a YouTube creator, figure out how to start their own business. Is that possible? Is that something that you're seeing even happening right now?
Actually, that's so funny that you asked that question because it is. We're seeing in Gen Alpha, they are creators and producers in a way that we've never seen before.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what's the age range for Gen Alpha? It's 12?
I want to say it's like 12 to 14 and below.
12 to 14. Oh, okay.
So just because they grew up with, video games, tech, iPads, right? Like that's how they experience things. And they've also been able to see creators. You can be on, a metaverse type of thing or a Roblox and then build a product from there. I know a 12-year-old that decided to, they saw that some big brand came out with a sweatshirt and sold it in the metaverse. They did the same thing, right? They used AI, found a drop ship place, made their own logo using a tool. And then, that's out there now. So now they are their own, mini entrepreneur, which I just think is exciting. I think it's exciting. I think it's important to, teach that at a young age. I don't know about you, but I definitely came from a family of like the lemonade stands on 4th of July and kind of always, how you can have a side hustle. I actually used to bake cakes in college. When the cake mix went on sale, I'd get it for $1 and I'd sell them for like $10.
That's a great margin, Ginger. Wow.
Yeah. Well, and when you got volumes, right? Once I hit the sorority and frat houses, they would do 5 to 10 at a time. So then I just, couple weekends, make some extra cash, but things like that. I think it's important. And I think when folks are feeling productive and like they're making a difference, I think that's what's really missing. So many folks are not engaged at work. And I think it's because, I'm very blessed to be, in an industry I love, working on topics that I love, but not everyone has that. And I definitely think that AI has the ability, like let's, walk through a case scenario. Let's say that you're someone that maybe, just got laid off from something, you don't even know what to do next. And so you can go in and say, here's my LinkedIn, here's what I've done. here's what I do with my free time. Like, what other questions should I be asking myself to figure out what I might have a future career in? And it's going to spit out a whole bunch of ideas that then you can kind of iterate on, look into, maybe have some info, calls with friends or buddies. And it's so exciting to have a tool that's able to bring that together, to take just information triangulation and turn that into like purposeful and meaningful life work.
And I also think it's so much different than what we've experienced, especially in America with the World War II generation, where it was coming home and there were jobs, right? And they had to go create their own jobs. And the VA was so instrumental in that, in creating jobs for the veterans coming back on the war front. And when the men went off to war, the women stepped up and fought, or I shouldn't say fought, but the women stepped up in these roles that were vacated at that time. And so that was the standard quo. That was the norm, right? It was like people worked jobs in that traditional aspect. And I do think what we're seeing right now, which is to me is really fascinating. And, we're talking about almost an 80-year gap, right, in between when World War II happened now until, this being 2024. I think people have so much access to information, and there's creating this opportunity of choice of what you get to do. In school, it used to be you had to go to college and you had to get an education, and now you had to get a job. Now it's like you could do that if you wanted to be in corporate, but you also could go start your own business. And I'm an entrepreneur, and I know you've worked with a ton of entrepreneurs. To me, that's the lifeblood of this country specifically, is that small business owners, people starting out and making their own money and creating a business and growing at scale. I think it's really beautiful to be able to see. I want to pivot a little bit to intentionality, because this is something I admire in you. I admire this in your relationship with your husband, Matt. You're either traveling, you're in some sort of destination, you are constantly showcasing where you are with you and Matt. And I can only imagine, Ginger, that intentionality between the two of you is so important. It's so important to make dedicated time and space and conversation. And with his busy schedule and yours, how do you guys find the time to sit with each other, be present, and create that intentionality?
Yeah, that's such a heartwarming question. It's a few things, and one, don't apologize for calling me busy, because I am, but it is intentional. I've always been the type of person that wanted to go straight from school, then to sailing, and then to my serving job afterwards, and then wake up at zero period to be on ASB. So I love being stacked back to back. As far as how Matt and I make it work, it's really just prioritizing what's important. And we have one of our core principles with each other is really this idea of a shared life, right? Like everything we're doing is really a shared experience, because with his work, there are some folks that stay, home in their home state, and then they have really their own experiences up where their workplace is. Same with myself, right? Whether I'm going to a South by Southwest or, a client in some other state, trying to triangulate just the logistics of getting us in the same place at the same time. As you probably know with a relationship, it's not really about the big, grand moments. It's really about those little moments, right?
Yes.
So it's about like sitting next to each other on the plane, or on the Uber on the way to the plane, or, waiting before he's about to go on stage for a speech. I think once we kind of just had the shared life model, he nicknames me his Velcro wife, because we stick together. And there's been certain things where folks will say, oh, well, you're invited, but, your wife can't come. And to his credit, he always just says, my wife goes where I go. So if she can come, I'll be there. And if she can't, I won't be there. And I didn't even ask for that. I just appreciate that he does do that naturally, because we really have this shared life value. And that really came out of the pandemic. So I think when you get kind of addicted to being around someone and you realize how you kind of fill each other's cracks in different ways, you just want to be around them. You want to be around them. You feel more yourself when you're with them. I know that doesn't make sense, but it is a feeling. And while I'm someone that typically is focused on logic and data, it's a feeling that feels like a 1 + 1 = 3.
I love that.
It's just my favorite thing. So I'm excited I'm sure you're experiencing the same thing as well.
Yeah. Emily and I have, had multiple conversations about the integration as we're preparing for marriage. And one of the things that we've talked about is just intentional time too. And we're both busy. We both work for ourselves. It does get harder when you're trying to figure out on the calendars, where can we get a 10-minute to just hang out, or what activity can we do? And, we're exploring that phase right now of our relationship. It's like, what's the one thing that we both actually like doing together? That we can participate in and feel good that we're both doing that. And I think that's part of our preparation for marriage, and also part of a core value of the intentionality piece, is making sure when you speak to somebody with intentionality, you communicate in a way that there's purpose and meaning behind it. You're not just like saying stuff to say stuff. And one of the things that, speaking of just shared values, this is not on this podcast, I should say, we don't really talk about religion per se, or propagate it or push it on people. However, people who do know me know how important God is to me, or believing in a spiritual force or something greater than yourself. And, of course, honoring whatever people choose to call their faith and their belief systems is very critical and important to me, as well as Emily. For you, just for the sake of this conversation, I know you and Matt truly have put God at the center of your relationship, and also your belief system and your faith. And I love that. How do you guys allow God to come in times where there may be periods of tumultuous moments? You guys get in an argument, you can't connect for a couple days, or time is just a little bit like wonky. I haven't gotten back to him, or I can't be there, or I can't do this. How do you guys recenter and recalibrate using God at the center of that in your faith to strengthen your marriage?
Yeah, well, I think really great way to kind of overall respect all different types of, religions and higher power. I truly think for myself, if I was only doing kind of life for myself, and same with Matt, there's so much more when you're doing it for someone and something bigger. So I think that core principle in general, his love language is definitely acts of service. So giving, the fact that he's in kind of a servant leader role, it's just a great fit. And some folks see religion as a slice in their pie. I see it kind of as the crust, and everything else was built on top of that. So there's not a lot of, specific, I can't even really think of one kind of dramatic moment where we had to kind of, separate kind of our will from his will, because I think it's really baked into so much, and we don't really make any decisions without, the other person, or thinking about, kind of the broader
that's
purpose.
Really good.
So it's almost like, you can't wake up one day and just run the marathon, right? It is every day waking up, putting on your shoes, going a mile, going 2 miles, missing a day, going back. So it's really just the ongoing, kind of maintenance of knowing that's your center. And you're not going to give it right every day. And you're going to miss some days, and you're going to go backwards some days and get sick and have to regain that muscle and, all the kind of vigor you need to get there. But if you're both in it, right? Like you need two to tango. So it takes two to really have that. But once that really happens, it's kind of a bit natural, and it does take a while to figure out and get it to really click, right? When you're in your early dating phase versus fiance versus married, all of it's just an iteration of getting to know this person who you're really co-branding your entire life with, which is exciting and daunting at the same time. But the more you kind of get to unlock not only features of this person that like they are today, but almost unlock the better version of themselves, and not in a way that's tried to change, their perspectives or something that's core to them, but maybe show them, or just like any good leader, kind of inspire them into we could level up in certain ways and things, depending on, if that person, has cracks to fill, or has, things that they're just, less up on than you. So I'd say it's, pretty natural at this point, but it is something that you have to continually feed. We gotta eat every day. So do you have to, whether you're in a spiritual faith role.
Yeah, and I think that's so great that you phrased it in the form of a marathon, right? Like you're not just going to get up and go run 26.2 miles. Like you have to practice. You have to start with the 3 mile, the 5 mile, and the training runs, and there's going to be learning experiences along the way. One thing that came to mind when you were talking about the dauntingness of co-branding a relationship. There are people out there that I know in my audience that are, and listen to this show, that are in relationships or seeking those types of relationships where they can aspire to have the type of integration and shared life component that you and Matt have. I know that's something that even, Emily and myself are working diligently on is to have that shared life component. You're still you still have your own authentic life and the way of being, but you're also sharing your life with someone else. For those out there that are looking to maybe integrate more with their partner, and they haven't had that experience before, what are some key points that you can offer them in starting that conversation?
At the risk of sounding cheesy, I really thought from kind of early years on that the most important decision I would ever make would be who I married. I think, career could, be a whole bunch of different places. You don't choose your family, friends are also important, but truly, I always really just put that on a pedestal of making sure, the choices I was making in life, whether it was, choosing the harder major so I could, actually get some business experience, or just things that I wanted to improve on myself, but not just for me, but really for a future partner that I would have. So I think that a lot of it's about looking into your own mind shift. And I think some folks in our day and age with this culture, I think the culture of not committing is kind of just, it's normalized, right? It's completely normalized. Ghosting is normalized, which I don't understand. So these things that I think are actually like very negative for human connections and for building bridges and for having meaningful relationships, whether that's friendships or a future partner. I think you have to look at yourself and say, is this something that I'm going to be able to give up in knowing that I'm not the most important thing in my life? It's going to be building towards like a better version of myself in a co-brand. And I think some people just look for a person to fit, but I think it's a bigger kind of mindset of knowing. And for me, I trusted in God that He had someone out there for me. For those that don't have faith, I'd still say there's definitely so many people out there and fish in the sea that it's an exciting journey to be on. But the intentionality of really, dating with purpose, or really understanding that you're going to have to be vulnerable to let someone else come in and, help you elevate and help you co-brand. I definitely lean on the more exciting part rather than the daunting, because I had that mindset of thinking the most important decision I would make would be finding that person. So not everyone agrees, right? Some people may not agree. They might not want to have everything they do, tied and connected, or might view it differently, right? Culturally, that can be very different, where you can have really totally separate lives, but be, married by paper. So it looks different for everyone. For me, I would say, though, it is truly not only the most fulfilling thing, but you level up as a human. And I think that it's helped with relationships across the board, whether it's, friends or family or just things I'm passionate about.
At the end of the year, when you're sitting there around the holidays, what are two things that you hope you have accomplished this year? And it can be personal, professional, whatever the case may be.
Two things by the end of the holidays. Well, I know we started out with this topic, and I don't want it to be work related, but I really think AI is moving so fast. I hope that I'm able to see a positive trend toward people understanding how this is something big. This is not a new tool, right? This is going to be a wave similar to how we saw the internet kind of erupt and connect us in a way that we'd never been before. So I'm really hoping that there's not only a kind of better understanding around the positive impact it can, but of course, as we talked about earlier, I hope the negative part can, continually be solved and talked about in a way that kind of enables the positive part, because I think that leads to just so much good being unlocked from the human side. I also just hope to be healthy and happy and alive. That also might sound cheesy, but I see so many people, and we've all had friends get COVID or get the flu this season, and it just wipes them out for the week, maybe a couple more weeks with brain fog. And in those moments, you think, you're just so thankful to be healthy and moving and living. So I hope to be just up and about and continuing to do fun things. What about you?
I would probably say on the work front, this podcast to me has been one of those things where I've had this like back and forth tussle with it for like 5 years. And it's been a secret battle that I finally decided I'm just going to do it. And it's been this internal struggle I've had. And so when I finally decided to, press the button, so to speak, and just hit record and put myself out there and start having these conversations I've been really craving to have. My hope is at the end of the year that there are going to be hundreds of thousands of people impacted from these conversations and living authentically, whatever that may be to them. It may be working a job that they didn't love and they get to go surf in Costa Rica or live down there for the rest of their time because they believe that's more in alignment for them. Or they've decided finally to turn to a faith or a belief system that always felt like it was part of who they were, but they've rejected it for so long. That's my goal. My goal is to get these messages from people and or see it out on social media in the landscape. People deciding to choose themselves and people deciding to authentically live. So from a work aspect, that's my big vision. That's my big goal. On a personal front, yeah, I totally agree with you. Health and happiness, I'll obviously be married at the time, still in the newlywed mode. So, enjoying time with Emily around the holiday season is going to be really beautiful and very excited to embark on that chapter. And I think it's going to be great. And then one more thing is that to have more deeply connected relationships than what I started with this year. And I think that's a big one for me and something that I really pride myself on. So, Ginger, we're getting into the end of the episode. And before I ask you the last question that we ask every single guest, thank you so much, my friend, for coming on, for sharing your truth, for sharing your wisdom and your experience, and for letting people know what's on the horizon with AI and this new technology. I absolutely find it fascinating how fast it's moving. But there is a lot of hope and optimism. There is a lot to look forward to, that maybe this is the thing that actually frees us from the day-to-day grind of, quote, time management or task management and gives us an opportunity to connect. So thank you so much. Again, you're just one of those amazing people that I feel like is just really doing so much good in the world. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
I'm so honored you brought me on. And I have to say, I'm really proud of you for kicking this off and starting it because it's the hardest part, right? The hardest part to running the marathon is just buying the shoes to even start running. So this is great. I love what you're doing. Happy to continue to support. And I listen to some of your episodes, really quality people. I can't wait to listen to more.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, speaking of shoes, it's really difficult to buy shoes for me because I have flat feet and need a wide toe box. But again, I'll save that for another time, everybody. As you know, Ginger, we ask every single guest what their definition is of living their truth. And so, Ginger, what is your definition of living your truth?
I really think living your truth is living really beyond yourself. And I think it's for whether it's something or someone else. I think it's more important to really dig into what you could unlock by what you do, but in kind of the frame of how it could impact others in the world in a better place. So I'm a big overall utility person. I know that's a nerdy econ term, but I always thought, even if I'm doing the harder thing that I don't love, if you get this positive impact for, tens or hundreds of others, that is so much more fulfilling and rewarding. And I think authentic than really just, kind of self-serving. So that would be what I would say living my truth is.
Amazing definition. And again, thank you so much for sharing that with me and for sharing that with all of us. And thanks to you, everybody, for tuning into this week's episode of Live Your Truth Now. If you like what you heard, please go ahead and give us a follow on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch other episodes from the Live Your Truth Now podcast on our YouTube channel. Thanks again for tuning in. I'll see you next week.